that this is hard. Because there's a lot of us that hear this and say, well, I mean, if the kids weren't so annoying, if my spouse wasn't so annoying, if work wasn't, my boss wasn't such a jerk, right? Like, we've got to confess that there is a disconnect between what we believe and how we speak. And we've got to confess this. We've got to confess that there is a mending that actually needs to happen, and we have to confess that we can't do it on our own. Right? There's a part of every one of us that wants to say, okay, I acknowledge that there's a disconnect, and I will try harder to do better. I'm going to fix it. But you know what? That's not the gospel. Anybody who's peddled a try harder to do better sort of thing, they're lying to you. That's not the gospel. Instead, what the gospel is that there is good news. That Jesus did for us what we could never do for ourselves. That we're not going to be able to fix it, and we actually have the freedom and the privilege to confess, like, gosh, I can't fix it. And that's why God sent his own son to do for us what we could not do for ourselves. That God wrapped himself in flesh, and he lived like one of us, and he experienced all of the anger and all of the frustration and all of the tiredness and all of the upsetment. He experienced it all. And yet, in every circumstance, his words never fractured from what it is he knew and believed to be true. His words reflected the fullness of God's mercy and the fullness of God's love and the fullness of God's justice. And God became a new type of human. And our humanity is transformed in the shadow of the cross. That the light of the perfection of Jesus, that in the light of the perfection of Jesus, we get to confess our inability to live the way that Jesus lived. And in the wonder of his resurrection, we trust that we too are being renewed to be this new type of human that is not disconnected between our head and our mouth, or our heart and our mouth. We are brought into the same type of new humanity that Christ has. That it's not just our tongues that are being renewed, but it's our hearts, that our belief and our trust in God is being perfected. So that these renewed hearts happen and that every word reflects the truth of God. And this is the mercy that God offers us in Christ. This is God's mercy that changes our hearts and our lives. So the first thing we do is not try hard to do better. The first thing we do is confess that we can't fix it. The first thing we do is confess that what we really need is the mercy of God. What we really need is we need our hearts to be transformed by God.